Hello! Today we're going to be talking about my September TBR. I'm trying to film this early for once, so hopefully you're going to see this, if not before September starts, then in the early days of September. Other than that, I actually have a lot of books on my September TBR because I didn't really read a lot of books in August, so I kind of want to make up for it in September and read more books, but we will see. In any case, I will still be sharing all of these books with you in case you want to pick any of them up, especially since a lot of them are new releases, so maybe you're going to be excited about something and want to pick it up as soon as it is released. And we are starting off with the Inheritance games. Book 1 has been out for a while actually, but Book 2 is coming out on September 7th. So I haven't actually read Book 1, but I'm actually really excited about this whole series because I saw another booktuber kind of talking about these books, and she made it sound really interesting and exciting. Now, from what I remember, the plot is about a girl who inherits a wealthy person's estate, wealth, everything, instead of his kids and his relatives. And of course, they're not super pleased about that, but the catch is that she has to stay in his house for a year in order for this to actually happen. So, of course, she wants to. I mean, who doesn't want to inherit a nice amount of money and property? And I believe there's also a bit of a murder mystery involved. Again, I don't really know much about it, that is all I know, but this sounds really interesting, so I'm really curious to pick up both of these books, assuming, of course, that I like the first one. Moving on to The Last Legacy. And I don't remember what this book is about off the top of my head. It's been on my TBR for a long time, but it is coming out in September. So let me just pull up the synopsis and read it for you. So this is apparently a captivating standalone about family and blood ties, reinventing yourself and controlling your own destiny. Sounds a little bit cheesy, but let's keep going. When a letter from her uncle Henrik arrives on Brian Roth's 18th birthday, summoning her back to Bastion, Brian is eager to prove herself and finally take place in her long-lost family. Henrik has plans for Brian, but she must win everyone's trust if she wants to hold any power in the delicate architecture of her family. It doesn't take long for her to see that Roths are entangled in shadows. Despite their growing influence in upscale Bastion, their hands are still in the kind of dirty business that got Brian's parents killed years ago. Oh, intriguing. With a forbidden romance to contend with and dangerous work ahead, the cost of being accepted into the Roths may be more than Brian can pay. So, this sounds a lot more interesting. Yeah, I'm actually really excited to read this. It sounds like this might be a secret society kind of deal, which is really, really interesting to me. And I read mostly kind of high fantasy novels, so this is going to be a nice change, along with the 2 previous books that I mentioned. And the next 7 books are actually all part of the same world. They're not part of the same series. From what I understand, 4 of them are standalones, and the other 3 are part of the trilogy. And by the way, the 3rd book of the trilogy is the one that's coming out in September, and it is coming out on September 14th, and it is called The Wisdom of Crowds. Now, I don't really know anything about these books, except for the fact that they are set in the world of the First Law trilogy, and I read that trilogy a long time ago, and that is the only work from this author that I actually read, but I really loved it. So much so, in fact, that trilogy is part of my favorite books of all time, and so I kind of been kicking myself that I haven't picked up any more of the author's work. And now that his latest book is actually coming out in September, I think it's time to get cracking and get into that. I don't know how much you need to read the previous books in order to jump into the latest trilogy, which is the Age of Madness, but just in case certain characters do make an appearance later on, and since I've loved the author's what I've read of the author's work so far so much, I really want to kind of give it the proper time it deserves and read all of the books before I jump into his latest works. So, ideally, I would like to read all 7. Let me just tell you a little bit about the First Law trilogy. From what I remember anyways, it's been quite a few years since I read this. In this trilogy, we have a few main characters, one of which is Logan Ninefinger, or Nine Fingers, I can't remember. And he is a kind of down-on-his-luck warrior who has done a lot of fighting in his day, has had a lot of bloody battles, has done a lot of things that he regrets, and then he kind of stumbles into his next quest. very, very reluctantly, but he stumbles into it nonetheless. And that quest is initiated by a wizard who calls himself the greatest wizard of that particular time. And we don't really know if that's true or not, because he doesn't do a hell of a lot of magic. But he is initiating a quest, and Logan Ninefingers is one of his chosen companions. And another one is Giselle Dan Luther, who is a very, very selfish officer. And our final character, who is not part of this quest, but is definitely a very big part of the story, is Inquisitor Galacta. And he is a torturer who was crippled by, well, being tortured during a previous war. And I really, really like him. He's very, very snarky. I wasn't a big fan of the torture scenes just because that's not really something that I am into, but I liked the character so much that I was even excited to read those. Having said that, there is a lot of graphic violence in these books, so if you are not into that, then you might want to skip them. But I don't really mind that, I could take it or leave it, so I really, really love them. And as for the overall plot, well, we kind of don't know what it is in the beginning, but we know that there's a big war brewing, and it looks like the side that our characters is on is going to lose very, very spectacularly. So this is pretty much my little description of these books. I really hope that I did them justice and that they sound intriguing to you, because I highly, highly recommend you pick them up if any of this sounds interesting. My neighbor was just mowing the lawn very, very loudly, so I had to stop for a little while, so I think I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but, right, I was talking about the first Law trilogy, and how I very highly recommend it. Let's move on to the next book on my TBR, which is The Empire of the Vampire, and I actually heard about this book a really long time ago, and it's been on my TBR for a while, but it is finally coming out in September 14th, to be exact. I honestly don't really remember why I was so interested in this book. I don't remember anything about it, but I assume it has something to do with a vampire, so let me just read you the synopsis. From Holy Cup comes holy light. The faithful hands sets world aright, and in the 7 martyrs' sight, mere man shall end his endless night. Okay. It has been 27 long years since the last sunrise. For nearly 3 decades, the vampires have waged war against humanity, building their eternal empire even as they tear down our own. Now, only a few tiny sparks of light endure in a sea of darkness. Gabriel de Leon is a silver saint, a member of a holy brotherhood dedicated to defending realm and church from the creatures of the night. But even the Silver Order couldn't stem the tide once daylight failed us, and now only Gabriel remains. Imprisoned by the very monsters he vowed to destroy, the last Silver Saint is forced to tell his story, a story of legendary battles and forbidden love, of faith lost and friendships won, of the wars of the blood and the forever king, and the quest for humanity's last remaining hope, the Holy Grail. I honestly don't know how I feel about this. Having read the synopsis now, I'm not nearly as excited about it as I thought I would be, but it's been in my TBR for ages, so I must have put it on there for a good reason. So I think I'm still probably going to pick this up, but it's probably not at the very top of my September TBR, it's closer to the bottom. Next up we have something I am really excited about, and it is the Gilded Wolves trilogy. And book 3 is actually coming out on September 21st. Now all I know about this is that this is a fantasy heist storyline set in Venice, and that's pretty much all I need to know, honestly. I'm really excited about that, and I really, really love fantasy heist stories. And they're not very common, so I'm very happy when I find another one to kind of sink my teeth into. Next up, we have the book I am most excited for out of my entire September TBR. And this comes out on September 28th, and it is The Last Graduate. Now, I don't really know anything about this particular book, and I don't want to read the synopsis because I don't want to spoil the plot for myself, but I know that it is a sequel to A Deadly Education. And I absolutely loved that book. I mean, the writing there wasn't perfect or anything, but it was just so much fun. I was actually in a bit of a reading slump when I read it earlier this year, and it really got me out of it. I really enjoyed the plot, but mostly I enjoyed the main character. And our main character, Elle, is full of snark, full of kind of bitterness, but in a funny way. She's also a little bit murderous, but in spirit. She doesn't actually do anything about it. Anyways, Elle is a magician and she goes to a magical school. And by goes to, I mean lives at a magical boarding school. And this school is not Hogwarts. It is very, very evil, and a lot of monsters are trying to get in through the cracks into the school to eat the students in very, very nasty ways. And the school itself isn't very nice. It keeps giving you assignments, and if you fall behind, you're also kind of toast. So the lives of the students are definitely no cakewalk, especially if you don't come from money and you don't really have any clout on the inside. So after all of that, I do highly recommend A Deadly Education. It is just a very, very fun ride. And The Last Graduate is the sequel, so I'm really excited about it. Next up we have Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I don't really remember anything about this book or why it is on my TBR, so let me just read you the synopsis. So this book comes out on September 28th, and it is the first book in a new series about love, curses, and the lengths that people will go to for happily ever after. Okay, let's keep going. Evangeline Fox was raised in her beloved father's curiosity shop, where she grew up on legends about immortals, like the tragic Prince of Hearts. She knows his powers are mythic, his kiss is worth dying for, and the bargains with him rarely end well. But when Evangeline learns that the love of her life is about to marry another, she becomes desperate enough to offer the Prince of Hearts whatever he wants in exchange for his help to stop the wedding. The prince only asks for 3 kisses. But after Evangeline's first promised kiss, she learns that the Prince of Hearts wants far more from her than she's pledged. And he has plans for Evangeline that will either end in the greatest happily ever after, or the most exquisite tragedy. Okay, I'm not sure how I feel about this. I don't know why I put this on my TBR to begin with. It sounds kind of interesting, but it could also be very, very bad, so I'm not sure. It really depends on how well the author actually writes this, and I don't think I've read anything from the author so far. For all I know, this might be his or her debut work. Anyways, I don't really know anything about the author, so I don't really know how I feel about this book. But the synopsis is here in case you are interested in it, and maybe I will actually pick it up in September. We will see. But this is another one that's kind of moving to the bottom of my September TBR now. Next up, we have Iron Widow, and this is another book that I don't really remember anything about, but it's been in my TBR for a little bit, so let me read you the synopsis. By the way, this comes out on September 21st. Alright. The boys of Huaxia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, dream of pairing up with girls to pilot chrysalises, giant transforming robots that can battle the mecha aliens that lurk beyond the Great Wall. It doesn't matter that the girls often die from the mental strain. When 18-year-old Zetian offers herself up as a concubine pilot, it's to assassinate the ace male pilot responsible for her sister's death. But she gets her vengeance in a way nobody expected. She kills him through the psychic link between pilots and emerges from the cockpit unscathed. She's labeled an Iron Widow, a much-feared and much-silenced kind of female pilot who can sacrifice boys to power up chrysalises instead. To tame her unnerving yet invaluable mental strength, she's paired up with Li Shimin, the strongest and most controversial male pilot in Huaxia. But now that Zetian has a taste of power, she will not cower so easily. She will miss no opportunity to leverage their combined might and infamy to survive attempt after attempt on her life, until she can figure out exactly why the pilot system works in its misogynist way, and stop more girls from being sacrificed. So, to be honest, this just sounds like a kind of fun, easy ride, and I'm often in the mood for these types of books, so this is definitely a good one to have on my September TBR. Next up we have The Heart Principle, and this is book 3 in the Kiskoshian series. And this actually comes out on August 31st, or I suppose came out, depending on when this video goes live. Anyways, I actually read the other 2 books in this series before, and I had kind of mixed feelings and varying levels of enjoyment, but they were fun, they were easy, they were somewhat funny some of the time. And as I said before, sometimes I'm just in a mood for a book like that, so I think that this is a nice one to have on my TBR. Also, I know that a lot of people love these books, so in case you do, Let me read you the synopsis. A woman struggling with burnout learns to embrace the unexpected, and the man she enlists to help her. When violinist Anna's son accidentally achieves career success with a viral YouTube video, she finds herself incapacitated and burned out from her attempts to replicate that moment. And when her longtime boyfriend announces he wants an open relationship before making a final commitment, a hurt and angry Anna decides that if he wants an open relationship, then she does too. Translation: she's going to embark on a string of one-night stands. The more unacceptable the men, the better. That's where tattooed motorcycle-riding Kwan Lee comes in. Their first attempt at a one-night stand fails, as does their second and their third, because being with Kwan is more than sex. He accepts Anna on an unconditional level that she has just started to understand herself. However, when tragedy strikes Anna's family, she takes on a role that she's ill-suited for, until the burden of expectations threatens to destroy her. Anna and Kwan have to fight for their chance at love, but to do that, they also have to fight for themselves. Again, I don't really have anything new to say about this after the synopsis, but it sounds kind of fun. Let's see. And that concludes my September TBR. I realized that there are actually 18 books on this list, so that's definitely way too many for me to read in a month. I know that a lot of people can actually read that many, but I am not one of them. But I am a very big mood reader, so I like to give myself more options on my TBR. And that's especially true for this particular TBR because I have a whole bunch of series and trilogies, and if I'm just not into a particular series or trilogy at the moment, then I'm of course not going to pick up the next book in that series, so that kind of shrinks my TBR in that sense. Other than that, that's pretty much all I have to share with you today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know if any of these books sound interesting to you and what you're looking forward to reading in September. And I'll see you in my next video. Be you, always. Bye!